Hello, I'm Mark, and you're listening to Resource Talks. In this episode, I'm excited to be joined by Dr. David Davis, a researcher who has been in the South African mining sector for nearly 5 decades, although you'd never guess it by looking at him. Over his long career, Dr. Davis has been on the finance side of things, producing metal price forecasts for the likes of Credit Suisse, while also getting his hands dirty in the laboratory, earning himself a PhD in chemistry along the way. Dr. Davis will be talking to us about the energy crisis in South Africa, which is so bad that the government periodically shuts off the power to homes and businesses as part of measures to deal with it, a practice called load shedding. Given South Africa produces 3/4 of the world's supply of platinum, Dr. Davis has been busy researching how the market for this metal could be impacted by South Africa's ongoing power problems. A lot of investors have recently got excited over platinum, which is trading at around half the gold price at $950 an ounce, despite being 30 times rarer than the yellow metal. Platinum has a number of noteworthy demand-side catalysts too, including its use in the production of green hydrogen power. We'll get into all of that and more in a moment. First, let me say that despite Dr. Davis's impressive credentials, he cannot give you, a stranger watching him on YouTube, personal finance advice, and clearly nor can I. So please do more research before taking any decisions with your money. And remember that commodity markets are unpredictable and volatile beasts. With all that said, David, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much, Mark.
So, first question then, why is South Africa experiencing energy problems for somebody like me who really has no knowledge about the issue?
Well, it's a long story, but to cut it short, the South African government, since taking over in 1993, has not spent the required amount to replace the power which they had been told by experts that it should be replaced. Furthermore, we've had a significant amount of corruption and mafia in all industries, but particularly talking about Eskom. Basically, there wasn't enough put into it, energy, money to refurbish the aging coal plants. Now, the average age of the coal plants are about between 40 and 45 years old. And most of them will be coming to a dead stop. It means the turbines and so forth are not licensed unless you stop the power station and basically rebuild all of them. So the conditions are that the power from the coal-powered fire stations will generally start declining, which it has done over the next 10 to 15 years. However, the input and the replacement for that generation will come from renewables. And South Africa has been given $88 billion from a consortium of the British, the European government, etc., to replace these aging power stations. There has been a lot built, but not enough, and a lot stuck in the mud, if I'd like to call it. Having said that, the power stations are aging, and there is a relationship between, I noticed from the Department of Energy in the US, there is a relationship, a certain relationship between the age of the power station and the capacity factors of the power station. And certainly it falls off. Now, the attempts to increase the output of the power station really depends on the efficiency factor or the capacity factors. And we can get, the idea is to raise those EAFs, the energy factor, to up to 75%. Whereas last year, they came in, and I'm talking about the coal-fired energy factors. It came in at 58 point something. And basically at 58% is very, very low. The government's target is to bring it up to 65 and then up to 70. Most of the experts in South Africa on coal-fired stations, and I must point out, I'm not an electrician and an expert on coal fires, but it's generally known in public that a lot of money is being spent on maintenance and to try and increase the energy factors of these plants.
And explain to us, what is load shedding, and what is it like to live with that on a daily basis? Because you're there in Johannesburg.
Yes, load shedding is really required by law to keep the grid in balance. If the grid is not in balance, then it can cause major outages of power. Now there were 8 stages of load shedding, and each stage the Eskom had to take off 1,000 megawatts of power. So stage 1 would be 1,000 megawatts. Stage 8 would be 8,000 megawatts. Subsequently, those stage levels have gone up to 12. So it means that it could reach that in a worst case scenario. So load shedding is deliberately done throughout the day and night, or periods either of 2 hours or 4 hours, depending on the load shedding frequency. So you just go into the dark, and of course it causes a mayhem in the townships and also in the general populace. Having load shedding, industry is affected significantly.
A statistic that I found was, just to put it into context. So it says stage 1, as you said, is 1,000 megawatts, which they said is about 1 million kettles. But in a population of 60 million, that doesn't sound like a lot of power that needs to be saved. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got stage 8, and it says Eskom estimates that the average South African will be supplied with power for 50% of the time, with connections turned off for 12 hours out of every 24. So what is the, what stage are you at right now? What stages have you experienced over the last 12 months or so? What's the worst it's gotten, and what's the sort of average? What's the best it's been?
Well, I'd rather unfold it, this conversation with load shedding, because in my recent paper, I presented together with Clyde Madison a relationship between load shedding and the effect it has on the stages and particularly platinum mines. Now, having said that, the load shedding at 40%, and if we can just turn to the platinum mines, at 40% is 20% out, mandatory. Now, the mines start depending on the protocol they adopted, whether they're deep mines or narrow, shallow mines or open pit mines. The adoption is different, the protocol is different. But we'll talk about a medium mine, and it's worse with a deep mine. You'll start switching off, for example, two of the mills, and those sort of things gradually as the load shedding creeps. And the experience is that prior to, I would say, January this year, February, we were experiencing series 5, 6, 7, and 8. And so those people who have not installed solar panels and battery power which is the majority of the population, were suffering badly. Subsequent to that, the government, as the onset of winter came, the government decided that economically it was better for the country by using the gas turbines. These diesel turbines, the diesel turbines are used, and there are 4 sets of them, are used to generate reserve capacity of about 3,000 megawatts. So they pumped up the reserve using a significant amount of diesel a day and about 3 billion rand a month. And well past their budget. And also they reduced the maintenance, which is not unusual in wintertime. But this time it dropped the load shedding nicely. And everyone was saying, look what the government's done. The load shedding is between 1 and 3, and it's not affecting us that badly. And we started off with a warm winter with the climate change. Now on Monday we had snow and frost and everything combined, and we started seeing the effects of outages due mainly to insufficient maintenance, and also the reserve capacity on the diesel turbines wasn't there. So currently we're expecting we are in stage 6, which we are in stage 6 right now. So between periods during the day at 4 o'clock to 8:30 is a stage that we were in. Earlier this morning, we were in a 2-hour load shedding period. So it's come back with a vengeance, unfortunately. And the experts are saying that there has been some good work done, but you can't fix these power stations to the extent that they should be running at 65 to 70% EAF factor.
And talking about your latest research paper, in which you tried to calculate how the various stages of load shedding would correspond to changes in platinum output in the country. So I'll quote some of the statistics that you wrote in there. So you said that Impala Platinum, the owner and operator of several platinum group metal mines, said that at stage 4, the mine is required to offset 20% of its power. At stage 5, it stops mining at various locations and only uses power to evacuate underground employees and maintain safety measures. And you said that right now you're in stage 6. So what does that mean then for these platinum mines in this moment? What's going on? Have they just stopped all activities, all smelting, all processing, all actual mining, or
Yeah.
what's going on?
Well, it's extremely complicated situation because a number of mines, all of the mines, have alternative generators for safety. So safety is first on the mines. So they will have enough generation to withdraw people coming up from out of the mine. They will have enough generation for all the safety aspects. They're all clamoring to build 100 megawatts, up to about 100 megawatts power PV cells to reduce the effect of load shedding. In fact, has been an extreme sort of an exponential expenditure on the mines to rush and put in facilities to reduce that. But what happens is at a stage 4, depending on the type of mine, the structural infrastructure, as I said, they would probably shut down a mill and a float plant. The underground section, some sections may be shut down, but they'll carry on mining. So you're bringing ore up while the mill is slowing down. So you have a head of ore, if you like. The major problem occurs at that stage with the smelters and the converters and the refinery, because the smelters have to be treated like a baby. You can't just switch a smelter off, as you may know. So it has to come off and it will treat less. And so your inventory in the system will build up. And we've seen that happen. That's building up inventory. Now, the space between that we've had hardly any load shedding, so they may have got that inventory through, and as a result have produced the platinum. If it carries on to 5 and 6, then it becomes a bit of a problem, because you'd have to stop the milling sections and people would have to come out the ground. And the refineries, which refine the platinum, will be really running on very low power.
I find it quite hard to believe, though, that these multi-billion-dollar operations haven't set up off-grid power generation alternatives, because I mean, presumably, you know, in your house, for example, when load shedding happens, you have backup power sources. So why wouldn't these mining companies also have established the sufficient amount of backup energy generation capacity in order to continue on without any problems?
It was illegal. That's the answer. The answer was that the industry has been crying for years to set up alternative power for their big plants. And they were only, when I say just really recently, within the last 2 years or so, maybe slightly more longer, that it went up to 50 megawatts. Then it went up to 100 megawatts. And I think they're trying now to get rid of this law, which the ANC brought in because of the number of employees at Eskom would drop dramatically and decline, which it will do anyway.
And Eskom Eskom is like the government provider of energy.
Yes. So yes.
So it was illegal then for alternative off-grid power generation to be established, is what you're saying?
That's right.
Wow. And you also said in your report that you're expecting the unit cost of production for platinum miners to increase exponentially, resulting in a squeeze on margins. So I guess that would be very bad news for people who bought shares in South African PGM miners like Anglo American or Impala Platinum. But could you explain why you foresee this squeeze on margins? Is it because of the cost of bringing in their own off-grid power generation? Is that where you see the extra cost coming from?
No, they were running at margins between 40 and 50%, which is very high. When what they call the basket price, you don't just mine platinum, you mine palladium, rhodium, iridium, and so forth. So you have 6 PGMs, if you like, in the mining bulk. Now, the big booster to the basket price was rhodium when the prices went through the roof. So the relationship between very high prices of rhodium and then higher prices of palladium and not so high of platinum is now becoming extremely difficult. I have some numbers. 8.5% over the year, platinum has dropped, palladium 17%, and rhodium 37%. So you can see the basket of revenue has changed dramatically. So that's one of the problems. The other problems, of course, are structural problems, which basically, if you can't get them, then that would reduce the margins, for example. And so, unless you get extra power, you will see. And the world has been has to contend with the inflation rate, and particularly steel in South Africa, and all the mining ancillaries are increasing in cost dramatically. What has offset that is the exchange rate, the ZAR USD exchange rate. But it's for rhodium, it's blown out. For platinum, the exchange rate, I think, is increased by 18%. So basically, if the exchange rate increases to the extent of the basket decreasing, then you've got a sort of an equilibrium type condition. But that hasn't happened. It's gone overboard. So you will see closer margins. The other factor, which is a big factor, is that the stay-in-business capital, with the mines generating a lot of money, upped their stay-in-business capital. And some of them have had to, because Mogalakwena mine is an open-pit mine, so they have to cut and strip. And so the stripping costs are very high. But the stay-in-business capital has increased dramatically. And so that is probably a major factor that we've seen margins come. We will probably see the margins come down and directly. However, you asked the question, does that, in terms of investment on platinum, create a problem? It does initially. But in the medium to longer term, you're going to turn that round, because the requirement for platinum is increasing rapidly. The reduction and palladium was used in gasoline vehicles mainly. Now, because palladium was at a high price and platinum was at a low price, the manufacturers are switching out of palladium to platinum. So there's a use again for platinum. So it's a complex.
Sorry to stop you, but let's just save the conversation about the demand side for a bit later on, and let's just keep talking about the supply side for now. So you forecast in this paper that we're discussing that it was in April that the projected estimated loss in global mine supply of platinum would represent around 11.5 to 18% of total global production. But on the other hand, the World Platinum Investment Council don't seem to share your view, because in their Q1 2023 report, they forecast total supply this year would fall by just 1% year on year. So where is the World Platinum Investment Council going wrong in your view?
Well, what I put down here was the worst case scenario with assumptions on the frequency of load shedding. So all of these assumptions are high frequency load shedding, which at that time was the order of the day. The World Platinum Council has, by the way, they didn't talk about ESCOM for a number of years.
For political reasons? Or?
Well, I don't know.
Possibly.
I think possibly. However, it could well be. They did say that it was due to inventory increases, using the inventory. But yes, most of the mines will come out slightly below their guided figures, simply because of eating up the inventory in this period, which when we didn't have the load shedding. So I would think that yes, we will. This explanation here still stands, and given that they haven't got standby generators or solar cells, it still stands. Yes, and not only that, we talk about ESCOM is an exasperating problem. The mines themselves in the longer term are not developing fast enough. New mines are not developing, and the grade is dropping. So you have a conundrum that actually adds to that problem. So we're not going to see any more platinum peak out. A few mines going on, mines coming off. We're not going to see any big increase in platinum at all. In fact, we'll see a decrease over the next 5 to 10 years, simply because of the underground.
So just to clarify, sorry, your forecast then of 11.5 to 18% decline in global platinum production is a worst case scenario based on the most severe possible load shedding. Is that right?
Yes.
So what do you think about the figure from the World Platinum Investment Council of a 1% fall in global production? Does that sound like an overly optimistic forecast, or does that seem like it could be right to you?
I don't think it'll work for them.
Okay.
I have not a battle, but I would say some of the research of World Platinum Council is pretty good. They've got good set of researchers, but they missed a trick or two. In particular, calculating the supply and demand mismatch. And that's the subject of my latest paper. But I think it's they've also used the company's projections. Now, I don't think any company will. So the company will be very conservative, because if they don't want to tell their shareholders that it might be even worse. But we haven't seen any sense distribution, so they'll probably come in slightly below their targets.
And South Africa produces 73% of the world's platinum, followed by Russia and Zimbabwe with 10 and 8% respectively. Could you give us an idea of what's going on with the Russian and Zimbabwean production numbers? Could either of those countries make up for South Africa's declining output?
Zimbabwe has been more stable. It has had its problems, but we won't see such a big increase year on year. And Russia is anyone's bet. But I had a look at the 24 projects which Russia has had on the table before the war with Ukraine, and they have in fact said that they have put those out in terms of timing. So I'm pretty certain, and I think that we'll see a slight drop, 3 to 4%, up to 5% in Russian output for platinum. Yes. The problem is getting the right figures and where they're going. But,
and what about Zimbabwe? Because they're not racked by the same sort of issues that Russia are. Couldn't they step in and they presumably don't have the same sort of power grid problems that South Africa has, so couldn't they step in and sort of eat South African platinum breakfast in some sense?
No. A number of them have a hydro facility, which they're all, but they do encounter mining problems in Zim, and of course it is not that friendly part of the world to be in. But it seems pretty stable that they are, as far as the relationship between the president, because now they have to pay the Zimbabwe government in platinum and not in dollars. So they've made it slightly harder for them but they know where their bread and butter comes from. So that's the whole point there. But you won't see a tremendous rise. We used to see in South Africa productions up to 6 million ounces. Well, with the COVID and what have you, we dropped that dramatically, and people are looking for 3.8 million ounces to 4 million ounces. I think the higher ones are from the World Gold Council. But it's not going to stay there for very long.
Let's turn our conversation then and talk about the demand side of things. And the World Platinum Investment Council is very bullish in that respect, saying that they predict automotive and industrial segments will drive total demand for platinum 28% higher year on year in 2023. But the platinum price is down 15% today, July the 14th, compared with its peak this year in April of over $1,100. So does that surprise you that the platinum price has been falling? And where do you see the price headed over the next year or over a longer period as well?
I think if you look at all the precious metals, they've all fallen the cliff. Now one wonders, just to try and analyze that, and it's really difficult because the communication that I've had with people who went to the Shanghai Platinum Council's function, they all seem to think that the investors are very twitchy and they're not moving. However, they are predicting a deficit of around about 1 million ounces in 2023. Now, the prediction of a deficit says, well, we haven't got any more platinum because the demand is greater than the supply. And so other research organizations don't have as much of a deficit, but they're all trending down into the deficit area. So it reasonably, one could say, well, if the if the platinum is in deficit, it obviously difficult to come by, and we should climb into platinum. Similarly, the same thing happened with palladium some years ago. Went into deficit, and the palladium price rose significantly. But then the demand factors were different then than they are now. So I think every investor is trying to figure out when that price of platinum is going to start moving. And the introduction of electric cars and mostly the hybrid cars. Now, the hybrid cars, obviously, the ICE and the electric vehicles put together also have catalysts, and they have just as much of the three-way catalysts than the car which is going around the world today, the average car. So with the hybrids, you're still going to have platinum, and also with heavy-duty vehicles. But they are certainly moving towards the electric vehicle side. But there's a downturn in cold weather. The electric vehicle, it doesn't perform very well, whereas you could fire up a fuel cell vehicle immediately. So the move, albeit a long term, is into fuel cells, and that's where it's going. Unfortunately,
I'll get on to the green applications in a moment, but let's just focus on the price. Do you see where it is right now, around $900? Do you see that as a floor? And how does that compare with the marginal cost of production of miners in South Africa?
Well, that really is below the marginal cost. If you put it in terms of rand, we're looking at with capex. People are looking here at somewhere between 20 and 25,000 rand per ounce, whereas previously it's been sitting at 16,000 rand per ounce. So it will clobber margins if that rand doesn't appreciate further, depreciate further. I see the rand is appreciating slightly, but over the year it'll cause a bit of mayhem.
And I understand you used to work for Credit Suisse, no, producing price targets for platinum and other metals. So do you feel confident to give a price forecast now about where you see platinum going, or is that really outside of what you feel comfortable saying?
Well, look, it is really. I think myself it will be highly volatile because we have a possibility of increased interest rates in the States, although inflation is coming down, and we have quite a significant turmoil in the world. So I think it will be volatile, but in that volatility, there will be a trend upwards.
Okay, let's talk about.
And I must tell you, I'm a platinum man.
You're a platinum man. Okay, so you're money where your mouth is. Let's talk about. Yeah, carry on.
No, it's. I put up solar panels because I knew the ESCOM was going to completely do us in. So fortunately,
they contain platinum.
No, they don't. They do contain silver.
Well, there you go. Let's talk about platinum as a green metal, because I know this is something you're knowledgeable and passionate about. In the very second line of your latest report, in the sort of opening summary section, you write, the impact on the South African PGM platinum mine supply will be disastrous for global platinum supply. I think I might be misquoting you there, because I think the original was more eloquently written. But anyway, then you go on to say, moreover, this situation will likely create a barrier to global decarbonization. So why is platinum important to global decarbonization? What is the link there?
There's one simple pillar: hydrogen. Platinum produces hydrogen. Now, there are many producers of hydrogen which are not platinum. So it produces green hydrogen. And depending on the usage and where you are regionally, where you are in the world, you need the conversion is another pillar. Hydrogen will be the pillar. There's no doubt about it. In the longer term, it will in some form or the other enter all industries. The biggest one is possibly the production of ammonia, and because ammonia can be transported pretty well over the seas, and you can turn it back into a hydrogen, or you can use it for fertilizer. All of the gases you use in steelworks may not need green platinum, but close to green platinum. So platinum is in fact in conjunction with, as platinum was inextricably linked to autocats, platinum is now becoming inextricably linked to climate change. So if we see, although the amounts of platinum, the manufacturers use a lot of methods and improved technology to, if you like, reduce the amount of platinum thrifting, they call it, in the system. And so thrifting has improved or has lessened the amount of platinum used in fuel cells, for example. The problem with that is that on the other side of the fuel cell is iridium. Now, iridium is a very rare precious metal, and currently the use of ruthenium is being used to see if it will, in a mixture, if you like, do the same job as iridium. So there are limitations, but no doubt technology will overcome that.
So you're telling me that platinum is a green metal, just like lithium or copper or cobalt, but it is not receiving the same sort of attention as those big named metals. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Mm.
Well, if you look at...
Sorry,
carry on.
No, you go.
No. Yeah. Well, if you look at the military figures from the US, there's only 8,000 ounces of platinum in their stocks. But there are lots of platinum in the banks. But in a military, in their military stocks, not very much.
So it's yet to sort of achieve that transition from precious metal to industrial metal in the minds of planners in the sort of military industrial complex over there in the US. Okay, interesting. A statistic though that I saw that I wanted to read to you from the World Platinum Investment Council again, and it says current EU and China green hydrogen generation capacity targets alone would require cumulatively between 300 kiloounces and 600 kiloounces of platinum by 2030. But that is really quite tiny, isn't it? Given that that's a cumulative number from now to 2030 for two of the biggest economies in the world, 300 kiloounces to 600 kiloounces. And yet the mining supply in just 1 year is around 10 times that amount, around 5,000 kiloounces for this year forecast. So is it fair to say that really green hydrogen isn't going to make much of a dent in the demand picture, at least in the next 10 years?
No, I think it's rapidly advancing. It's rapidly advancing. I saw some figures that the amount of money spent on fuel cell production, PEM production of hydrogen is in fact with the way that the world is going. And in fact, China has imported much more platinum than actually the research organizations have said they imported for their use. So China has been absorbing extra platinum, which has given the research organizations a bit of a corundum from the supply and demand point of view. The equation is incorrect, simply because if you put on another 1 million ounces, for example, into the supply side of the equation, you'll get a deficit, a straight deficit. So they actually leave it in the bottom drawer without telling anyone.
And what would the incentive for them to misreport it be feasibly?
Well, I think it's just traditional, supply and demand. In the early days, there was hardly any inventories around the world. And so it may have worked quite nicely in the early days. But now you're seeing a significant inventory, if you like, in circulation throughout the world. You see traders trading platinum, people shipping platinum from Japan to maybe North America and vice versa. So you're getting a more complex situation. In other words, your supply and demand formula becomes imports or stock equals, in brackets, supply minus demand, in brackets, minus exports. So you're now building up an inventory. Now it's the underground inventory which is the most important to know and get a handle on. But it's a very difficult thing to do, simply because the only area where you can get that numbers is from UN trade data. Now, you must treat UN trade data with a big red warning sign, simply because from time to time in their figures, there are figures which are incomprehensible. So if you want to do it properly, you have to analyze almost every country in the world who has imports and exports of platinum and check every number.
And you say that China are building up this big inventory of platinum. And do you suspect that that's for sort of investment purposes, to defend the value of their currency on foreign exchange markets? Or do you see it as being more tactical, for industrial purposes? Or how would you explain that increase in inventory in China?
Critical metal. Basically a critical metal. You see, the interesting point about China, and it's probably the most easiest to analyze, is that China imports, but it doesn't export. So the import of China, of platinum into China, is a black hole. So it doesn't come out at all.
So you suspect for domestic production then?
Domestic production, and also I would say is building up critical stocks, because they started doing it since 2009, building their stocks.
And that was presumably before people were using platinum as a catalyst in these green hydrogen fuel cells, no?
Well, it was when they were on testing and all of those things. It was in its infancy. So they've been, and I reported that in 2017. The World Platinum Council tripped over it in 2021, 20, and didn't go back to 2009.
Do you?
So yes,
this is sort of a sensitive question, and feel free not to answer it if you don't want to. But it sort of sounds like you're suggesting that you think the World Platinum Investment Council is in the pocket of the Chinese government, and they don't want to say certain things for fear of offending them. Is that accurate, or is that not your view at all?
No, I think they're being over conservative because they don't want to rock the boat in any way, and so they use public information gathered, and not information that says, if this happens, what that would happen. They've come out of their cocoon recently, but no, they're a very professional organization, but they are conservative. So, and they're well up in the demand for platinum, fuel cells, and so forth.
So, South Africa, turning back to the energy crisis there, we know it's a leading producer globally of platinum. It's also just a leading global producer of platinum group metals, which includes palladium and rhodium. So do you have a view on those metals, and why did you choose to focus this latest report and many of your previous reports on platinum? Why don't you write so much about these other platinum group metals?
Well, they're a very small amount. I think there's only about 180 tons coming out of South Africa of iridium, and the platinum is, as I say, the pillar to platinum is hydrogen, green hydrogen, and so it's one of the most exciting times, if you like, whereby you can see what is going to happen. Obviously one hasn't a crystal ball, but you can see that as you said, 73% of platinum comes out of South Africa. So that's why I've concentrated on that. Previously I have concentrated on palladium, but and also I did my doctorate on platinum, so I have a bit of a leaning towards it.
But presumably these energy problems in South Africa, which would be a headwind for the supply of platinum, will just as much be a headwind for the supply of palladium, no? Or rhodium as well.
Rhodium is it will be. Palladium, obviously, in fact, I heard, when was it? A couple of years ago, before Russia started their war with Ukraine, they offered $100,000 to entrepreneurs to find out what other uses could be used for palladium. I would think that they should have offered a bit more money than that, but that gives you a concept that palladium needs to be used, and it will be cheaper to be used eventually than platinum. So it does have to.
Right. Sort of searching for a function in the world. I know that
Yes.
feeling. Very sad. So, David, it's been a fascinating conversation and a real privilege to get the benefit of your decades of experience. Before we wrap up, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you'd like to mention?
Well, no, I think you covered it very well. The real problem is not the technical problem, is the social problem in South Africa. The social problem that load shedding is impacting the villagers and the poor people, and also the relatively rich, because that will entice anger. Why can't we have electricity? And that also has a knock-on effect with water supply. At sort of the level 6, the water supply from the major water delivery plants, their pumps are off. So it's a very complicated problem socially, probably more so than the technical side. So the social aspect must be taken into account when we look at all of these aspects.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like. I mean, I have the experience of living in developing countries. I lived for 2 years in Colombia. I'm currently in Argentina. And, you know, sometimes there are power cuts occasionally. But the idea of power cuts just being a part of life, you know, scheduled. I mean, what is that like as a daily reality for people who don't have backup? I mean, your fridge, I guess, is off for hours in the day. I mean, how can you buy and store food, for example? I mean, what do people do?
Well, they begin to hoard, but they haven't got any money to hoard. So it's the transport systems. It's to go to a worst case scenario. One could say that, you know, how do you fill your car with petrol if the petrol station hasn't got a generator? You know what I mean? How do you use your cell phone when your battery backup on your cell phone pylons is finished? See, they only last about 4 hours. Otherwise, that's so there's a knock-on effect to everybody. It's that is a very big, and politically it is causing a lot of problems.
And do you see it getting better?
No.
No.
The social problem, no. Because of the money involved, the ESCOM will in fact eventually be, if you like, not used so much, and we will see that individual manufacturers, mines producing their own electricity. And so the price of electricity will go up again. It's gone up about 500% in the last 5 years, 6 years. So it'll become defunct. Really.
Wow. Dr. David Davis, thanks again for taking the time today. Is there anywhere that our listeners can go to keep up with you and your research, and any sort of online websites that you can direct them to?
I consult through Actis and Indigo. So Actis Precious Metals have my latest reports. They've not been very forthcoming this year because I've been doing a lot of research on the data that you asked me about, the underground stocks, and that takes time. But they can go to Actis Precious Metals and then push the news. And in that news, there'll be a list of papers which have been written.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks again, and hope to have you back on the show again soon for another update.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.